Taeyang Kim walked through the long hallways of the Galactic Council station. His footsteps echoed on the shiny crystal floor. He had been making this same walk for 15 years now. Every day, the same meetings. Every day, the same dismissals. Every day, he smiled and pretended it didn't hurt. The council chamber was massive. It had to be big enough for all the different alien species. Some breathed oxygen like humans. Others floated in special containers filled with strange gases. The Vrau looked like giant living crystals that sparkled in the light. The Krell looked like huge insects with multiple eyes. The Nethics were clouds of glowing particles trapped in energy fields. Taeyang sat in the human section. It was smaller than most other sections and placed at the back of the room. This wasn't an accident. It was meant to show that humans didn't matter much to the council. They were newcomers. Primitives. Barely worth noticing. The council recognizes the human delegation, a voice announced through speakers. Taeyang stood up and walked to the speaking platform. He held a data tablet in his hands. Honored members, I come to request your help. The Krell have increased their tribute demands on our colonies by 40%. This breaks the agreements we signed 3 years ago. A Krell delegate made a clicking sound that meant laughter. The human complains about legal fees. Maybe if your species had invented faster travel sooner, you would have claimed better planets. Other delegates made sounds of agreement. Taeyang felt his chest tighten but kept his face calm. We simply ask that you honor the agreements we made. Noted and dismissed, the voice said. Next matter. Taeyang sat back down. This was normal. This was how it always went. Humans presented evidence, made reasonable requests, and the council ignored them. Sometimes they didn't even bother to dismiss the requests. They just moved on like humans hadn't spoken at all. After the meeting ended, Taeyang went back to his room and wrote his daily report to Earth. He kept his words professional and neutral. But anyone reading carefully would understand the truth. The Galactic Council saw humans as prey, not partners. Far across the galaxy, Minji Park dealt with the consequences of that attitude every day. She was the governor of Kepler 442, a human colony with 300,000 people trying to build lives on a world that should have been theirs. Instead, they paid tribute to the Krell every month. Metal, food, manufactured goods, all shipped away. The Krell called it protection fees. Minji called it theft, but only when no one could hear her. She stood at her office window looking at the settlement below. The buildings were practical and efficient. Human colonists had learned to build fast, to establish themselves quickly before someone could claim they hadn't properly occupied a world. The Krell still found ways to take what they wanted. Her assistant Juno entered with another tablet. The Krell are demanding access to the northern mining areas. They say we're not using them efficiently. Minji read through the demand. It was full of barely hidden threats. Prepare a response. We'll let them survey but keep control of operations. That's the 3rd time we've given in this month, Juno said quietly. I know. Minji put down the tablet. But we're not strong enough to say no. Not yet. Those last 2 words hung in the air between them. Juno nodded and left without saying more. There were things you didn't say out loud, even in the governor's office. Things about construction projects that weren't in any records. Things about supplies that arrived labeled as farm equipment but went to facilities deep underground. In space above Kepler 442, a cargo ship called the Morningstar finished docking. Its captain, Doyen Choi, personally watched the unloading. To anyone watching, it was a normal cargo delivery. Food and building materials for a growing colony. The cargo manifest was accurate, as far as it went. But certain containers needed special handling. They went to special warehouses that only certain people could access. Inside those containers were parts that would eventually become defense systems the Galactic Council would never approve. Doyen had been running these routes for 8 years. He looked like a normal cargo captain, a bit overweight, always complaining about costs and fuel prices. His crew seemed equally ordinary. What the Krell inspectors who sometimes checked his ship never discovered was that every member of Doyen's crew had fought in Earth's last war. That war had ended 70 years ago, but humans hadn't forgotten how to fight. They had simply learned when to hide that ability. On Earth, deep underground in facilities that officially didn't exist, Admiral Binahan reviewed the latest reports. She was a small woman, barely 5 feet 3 inches tall, with short gray hair. Her office had no windows and no decorations except one photograph of a young girl holding a graduation certificate. The reports showed a clear pattern. The Galactic Council's treatment of humanity was getting worse. Trade restrictions were tightening. Tribute demands were increasing. Several council species were making statements about humanity's genetic problems and dangerous emotions. The kind of language that usually came before worse things. Binna had seen this pattern before in Earth's history. The dehumanizing words. The steady increase of restrictions. The testing of boundaries to see what could be done without consequences. She touched a button on her desk. Status report on Project Red. A voice answered immediately. 93% ready, Admiral. We can be fully operational within 72 hours of your order. Continue current status. Maintain dark protocols. Understood. Binna ended the connection and went back to the reports. Humanity had been preparing for this since first contact with the Galactic Council. They had hoped it wouldn't be necessary. They had tried diplomacy, patience, and compromise. But they had also learned from history. Hope for peace. Prepare for war. The photograph on her desk showed Binna's granddaughter from 10 years ago. The girl was grown now, living on one of the colony worlds. Binna thought about her sometimes, about all the young people who had gone to the stars believing in a better future. The galaxy was teaching humanity that such beliefs were dangerous. That kindness was weakness. That civilized behavior made you a target. It was a lesson humanity would learn. But the galaxy would also learn something when the time came. They would learn that humanity's patience had limits. That their restraint was a choice, not a necessity. That choice could be unmade. Taeyang Kim prepared for another day of diplomatic theater. Minji Park managed her colony under occupation in everything but name. Doyen Choi loaded another shipment of hidden military parts. Binahan reviewed another set of emergency plans. All across human space, people went about their daily lives. They smiled at alien inspectors. They paid their tributes. They followed the rules made by species who thought humans were inferior. And they waited. The galaxy thought it knew humanity. Peaceful. Weak. Easy to control. The galaxy was wrong on all counts. But it would take something terrible for that truth to be revealed. In government buildings and military facilities across Earth, people monitored the situation. They watched the reports from the colonies. They tracked the Council's decisions. They noted every insult, every theft, every injustice. And they waited for the moment when patience would no longer be enough. When the careful diplomatic masks would have to come off. When humanity would have to show the galaxy what they really were. That moment was coming. Everyone could feel it. The tension was building like a storm on the horizon. Something was going to break. Something was going to push humanity past the point of restraint. When that moment came, the galaxy would learn a lesson it would never forget. That the quiet species in the back of the council chamber, the ones who smiled and compromised and seemed so weak, were none of those things. They were just waiting for a reason to stop pretending. The morning on New Jeju started like any other morning. Hyojin Yoon arrived at her classroom early, the way she always did. She taught 4th grade at Central Primary School. 1,200 students went to this school from all over the main settlement. The children came in with their usual energy, talking about games and friends. Hyojin smiled and got them to their seats. Today they were studying Earth history, specifically the ancient kingdoms of Korea from over 2,000 years ago. Today we're learning about the three kingdoms, Hyojin said, showing images on the display. Can anyone remember their names? A girl in front raised her hand. Goguryeo, Beach, and Silla. Excellent, Sumi. Now these kingdoms existed a very long time ago, back on Earth before we came to space. The building shook. It wasn't an earthquake. New Jeju didn't have earthquakes. Hyojin barely had time to register this before the alarms started screaming. Through the windows, she saw fire in the sky. Ships. Huge ships coming down through the atmosphere with weapons already firing. Training took over. Every teacher on New Jeju knew the emergency procedures. Hyojin moved to the door. Everyone up. Make a line like we practiced. The children were scared, but they listened. They had done evacuation drills. They formed their line and Hyojin led them into the hallway where other classes were coming out. Teachers called to each other, keeping order even as explosions shook the building. The building shook again, harder. Ceiling tiles fell. Something in the distance exploded with enough force to break windows. Hyojin and 3 other teachers got their students to the basement shelter. It was built for storms, not attacks, but it was the safest place they had. 200 children crowded into a space meant for half that many. Through the small high windows, they could see the burning sky. Hyojin recognized the ships from briefings all colony officials received. Vral warships. Crystal ships that sparkled even as they rained death. A teacher named Miho tried to get communications working. His hands shook as he worked his device. I can't get through. Everything's blocked. Keep trying, Hyojin said, though she knew it was probably useless. The children were crying now. Some of the older ones understood what was happening. The younger ones just knew the adults were scared, and that was terrifying enough. Another explosion, much closer. The building above them groaned. Hyojin pulled children close, putting herself between them and the ceiling. Other teachers did the same, becoming human shields. Hyojin's last thought was that she wished she could tell the children everything would be okay. But she had always believed in being honest with students. She wouldn't start lying now. The building collapsed. The shelter couldn't withstand it. Across the continent, Juno Lee was checking his farm's irrigation when he saw lights in the sky. He was a farmer, not a soldier, but he had served in security forces before retiring to farm work. He knew what orbital bombardment looked like. Juno ran to his house and grabbed his communication device. He tried the Colonial Authority first, got nothing but static. Tried planetary defense, same result. Finally, he set it to emergency broadcast and started recording. This is Juno Lee, Northern Agricultural Sector 7. We're under attack by Vral forces. Orbital bombardment happening now. They're not hitting military targets because we don't have any. They're hitting civilians. He paused, watching fire rise from the nearest town. 3,000 people lived there. Had lived there. I'm sending this on all frequencies, hoping someone hears it. We tried to surrender. The governor broadcast surrender as soon as the Vral appeared. They didn't respond. They just started shooting. Another pause. The house was shaking from impacts getting closer. This is going to my brother on Earth. Juno Lee, signing off. Tell them we didn't fight. Tell them we tried. The transmission ended. The plasma strike that hit Juno's farm vaporized everything for 2 kilometers. In orbit, Vral Commander Velmoth watched the bombardment with satisfaction. The human colony had violated some minor trade regulation, something about export paperwork. But violations needed examples. Velmoth had chosen New Jeju deliberately. It was successful enough to be noticed, isolated enough that help was unlikely, and completely defenseless. Perfect for demonstrating what happened when species failed to respect their betters. Broadcast this on all galactic channels, Velmoth told his communications officer. Let other species see what proper enforcement looks like. Let humans learn their place. The bombardment continued for 14 hours. The Vral were thorough. Cities, towns, farms. Infrastructure, shelters, hospitals. Nothing was spared. When it finished, New Jeju's 2 million people were all dead. The Vral fleet left, sending images of the destroyed world throughout the galaxy. Velmoth included a formal statement about maintaining order and following regulations. The Galactic Council held an emergency session. Not to condemn the attack, but to review the paperwork violation that prompted it. They concluded the Vral had acted within their rights as trade law enforcers. Several species expressed mild concern about the proportionality. The Nethix representative praised the Vral for their efficiency. The Krell suggested that human emotional problems had probably caused the violation in the first place. Ambassador Tae-Young Kim sat in the human section and listened to all of it. He didn't speak. Didn't protest. Didn't beg for justice. He simply recorded every word, every vote, every species that endorsed or excused what happened. When the session ended, he went back to his room and sent one encrypted message to Earth. 3 words only, they crossed it. On Earth, Admiral Binahan received the message in her underground command center. She read it once, then filed it securely. She sat alone in her office for exactly 5 minutes, allowing herself that time to feel the grief and rage. Then, she picked up a phone connected to no public network. It rang once. This is Han. Authorization code Crimson 77 Delta. Execute contingency red. Full deployment. No restrictions. A pause. Confirm, no restrictions? Confirmed. Safety protocols are lifted. Show them what we are. Across human space, people who seem like ordinary colonists, cargo crews, and administrators received coded messages. They stopped pretending. They went to hidden facilities, shed their civilian identities, and prepared for what they had trained their whole lives to do. Humanity had tried peace. The galaxy responded with massacre. Now the galaxy would learn what humanity had been holding back all this time. Tae-Young Kim stood before the Galactic Council for the last time. The chamber was fuller than usual. News that humanity was recalling all diplomatic personnel had spread fast. Council members wanted to watch the humans submit, apologize, beg for forgiveness. They would be disappointed. Tae-Young walked to the center speaking platform. He carried only a small data chip. His hands were completely steady. 15 years of practiced diplomacy, of swallowing anger and maintaining calm, had prepared him for this exact moment. Honored members of the Galactic Council, he began, his voice clear and steady. I stand before you one final time to deliver humanity's message. The Vral delegate Velrix made a crystalline laughing sound. Have the humans come to apologize for their violations? To beg for mercy? Tae-Yang ignored the interruption. For 15 years, we came to this council as friends. We brought gifts, cultural exchanges, genuine desire for peace. We accepted your insults. We tolerated your restrictions. We paid tribute we didn't know and followed rules that only apply to us. He placed the data chip on the podium. We did this because we believed in something better. We believed civilization meant choosing cooperation over conflict. We believed intelligence should lead to understanding, not exploitation. The chamber went quiet. Something in Tae-Yang's voice had changed. The careful diplomatic language was gone, replaced by something much harder. This chip contains 15 years of documented violations by Council species. Attacks on human colonies you ignored. Trade restrictions breaking your own laws. Requests for help you dismissed without investigation. Every plea we made, every time we asked for the justice you claimed to represent. Tae-Yang's voice grew colder. And, finally, it contains New Jeju. 2 million civilians murdered for a paperwork error. Children killed in schools. Farmers vaporized in fields. And this council, this gathering of supposedly civilized species, voted to approve the massacre. He stepped back. History will remember we tried. That we gave peace every chance. What happens next is entirely your fault. Taeyang turned and walked to the exit. The council chamber erupted in noise, dozens of species making sounds of outrage at his tone. Velrix's voice cut through the chaos. The human threatens us? Humanity has no fleet. No weapons that concern us. They are nothing. Taeyang paused at the doorway without turning around. You're right about one thing. We're not what you thought. Then, he left. In orbit above Kepler 442, former Governor Minji Park went down into the command center that officially didn't exist. The facility had been built over 10 years, carved into the colony's moon and disguised as mining operations. Minji changed out of civilian clothes into a uniform she hadn't worn publicly for 15 years. The rank insignia showed Rear Admiral. Around her, hundreds of personnel did the same, revealing their true roles. Status report, she commanded, taking the command chair. Kepler defense grid is online, her tactical officer reported. All weapons platforms active. Stealth engaged. We're detecting Krell patrol ships in the outer system, but they haven't seen us. Maintain stealth until we get authorization from Earth Command. Minji looked at the tactical display. The weapons platforms around Kepler 442 had been built piece by piece, hidden among commercial satellites and mining equipment the Krell barely bothered inspecting. Human colonists had pretended to be helpless while building one of the most advanced defense networks in the sector. Authorization came 20 minutes later. All units, this is Earth Command. Execute Protocol Red. Repeat, execute Protocol Red. Rules of engagement, unrestricted defensive operations. Protect human assets by any means necessary. Minji felt something release in her chest. Years of playing the weak governor, of bowing to Krell demands, of watching them take while she smiled and complied. All of that was finished. Tactical, drop stealth. Lock weapons on all Krell vessels. Broadcast on all frequencies, any Krell ship that doesn't leave this system in 10 minutes will be destroyed. The Krell Patrol commander's response was predictable. Outrage, threats, demands for surrender. Minji let him talk for exactly 30 seconds, then nodded to her weapons officer. The orbital platform fired once. The Krell Patrol ship vanished in a flash of light visible from the planet. 9 minutes, Minji said calmly. The remaining Krell ships fled. Doyen Choi stood on the bridge of what had been the freighter Morning Star. The civilian hull had been dropped, revealing the warship underneath. The ship that emerged was sleek, covered in weapons, built with technology the Council didn't know humans had. His crew worked with smooth efficiency. They had trained for this for years, running simulations during long cargo runs, preparing for a day they hoped would never come. All systems green, his tactical officer reported. Railguns charged. Missiles loaded. Point defense online. Fleet status? Doyen asked. 312 vessels completed transformation. Earth Command is sending target packages now. Doyen studied the display. Across human space, similar ships were emerging. Freighters, passenger ships, mining vessels, all dropping their disguises. And, from Earth, from hidden shipyards on the moon's far side, the real fleet was launching. Warships built in complete secrecy over 20 years. Ships designed for one purpose, winning a war against enemies with better numbers and technology. Humanity had studied every Council species. They knew the composition of Vral hulls, the frequency of Krell shields, the biology of Nethix forms. Every weakness, every vulnerability, catalogued and analyzed. And they had built weapons designed specifically to exploit those weaknesses. On Earth, Admiral Binahan addressed the entire human fleet through encrypted channels. Her face appeared on screens across hundreds of ships, in command centers on dozens of worlds. 2 million of our people are dead, she began. Killed without warning, without mercy, without cause. The Galactic Council approved this. They made their position clear. She paused. Our response must be equally clear. We're not fighting for conquest. Not for territory or resources. We're fighting because we will not allow genocide to go unanswered. All ships have authorization for unrestricted military operations against designated targets. Priority 1, Vral Supremacy Fleet. Priority 2, any Council forces that interfere. Rules of engagement: minimize civilian casualties, but protect yourselves and complete missions. Binna's expression hardened. Show them what we are. Show them what they unleashed. Make them understand that humanity's patience was a gift they should have valued. She raised her hand in salute. For New Jeju. Across the fleet, the response echoed back, for New Jeju. The ships began moving. Not random attacks, but coordinated strikes based on decades of planning. Humanity had watched and learned while the Council dismissed them as primitive. They had studied galactic warfare while playing helpless colonists. The galaxy was about to discover that humanity's weakness had been an act. And the performance was over. The Vral Supremacy Fleet moved through space with absolute confidence. 200 warships, crystal structures that glittered like deadly jewels. They were being sent to Earth to punish humanity's rebellion, to teach them the price of defiance. Commander Shulvax led the fleet. He had reviewed intelligence on human military capabilities. Primitive kinetic weapons. Basic shields. Chemical propulsion barely beyond early space age. This would be simple extermination. The fleet reached Earth's solar system outer edge, the region humans called the Oort Cloud. Sensors showed no resistance, no defenses. The path to Earth was clear. Maintain formation, Shulvex ordered. Prepare bombardment solutions for all human population centers. The first railgun round hit his flagship at 40% light speed. The projectile was just a tungsten rod, nothing exotic. But, at that speed, it carried more energy than most ship weapons could generate. It punched through Vral shields like they weren't there and shattered the crystal hull into fragments. Shulvex died without understanding what killed him. Commander Sujin Khan watched from the bridge of Gwangju's vengeance. The human fleet had been waiting in the Oort Cloud, invisible to Vral sensors. Stealth technology was one of humanity's specialties. When you expect to fight enemies with better numbers, you learn to hide. All ships, open fire, Sujin commanded. The human fleet revealed itself. 50 warships against 200. On paper, impossible odds. But, the Vral had calculated those odds based on false assumptions. The railguns fired in coordinated volleys. Each shot was calculated by AI systems more advanced than anything the Council had. The Vral had computers. Humans had developed true artificial intelligence and spent a century refining it. Vral shields collapsed under sustained fire. Their crystal hulls that seemed invulnerable shattered into expanding debris clouds. Ships that had terrorized a dozen species were destroyed in seconds. The Vral tried to return fire. Their energy weapons were powerful, able to melt through standard armor. But human ships didn't stay still. They moved in patterns no Council species used, random and unpredictable, making targeting impossible. And, when Vral weapons did hit, they struck layered armor designed specifically to handle energy weapons. Humanity had studied every recorded Vral battle and built ships to counter their tactics. The Vral tried to adapt. Some ships tried closing to ram with their crystal hulls. Human point defense eliminated them before they got close. Others tried to flee. Human missiles with AI targeting hunted them down. 8 minutes after engagement began, it was over. 200 Vral warships reduced to wreckage. The human fleet had lost 0 ships. 3 reported minor damage, nothing that couldn't be repaired. Sujin stared at the tactical display, at the field of destroyed ships. She felt no joy. This wasn't a game. This was extermination, and it sickened her even though she knew it was necessary. Broadcast engagement data on all galactic frequencies, she ordered. Make sure everyone sees what happened. Across the galaxy, military analysts from dozens of species watched the footage in stunned silence. Every assumption about humanity was wrong. The weapons technology alone was generations ahead of Council equipment. But, more disturbing was the tactical execution. Humanity fought like a species that had been preparing for war while everyone assumed they were helpless. Every movement calculated. Every shot precise. No wasted effort, no hesitation. Wu Jinnam sat in a secure Earth facility, directing information warfare. While the military fought with weapons, his job was fighting with data. He released centuries of intercepted galactic communications. The Council species thought their transmissions were secure. They never considered that primitive humans might have signals intelligence exceeding their own. The released files showed everything. Vral extermination campaigns against 3 species. Krell slave operations on 12 worlds. Nethic's manipulation of trade routes to starve civilizations. Every atrocity, every crime, all committed by species claiming to represent civilization. Wu Jin distributed the data widely, to every species in the galaxy. He wanted everyone to see the truth. The Galactic Council wasn't a force for peace. It was a protection racket run by predators who never faced consequences. Captain Yuna Shin led Strike Group 7 toward Vral mining colonies. Her orders were specific: destroy military infrastructure, disable economic capability, minimize civilian casualties. Humanity wasn't trying to commit genocide in return. They were trying to break the Vral's ability to wage war. The colonies had defensive platforms, but they were designed for Council-level threats. Human weapons cut through them effortlessly. Yuna's ships disabled mining equipment, destroyed processing facilities, eliminated defensive positions. When Vral security forces tried evacuating civilian workers, Yuna's ships didn't fire. They let them go. Orders were orders, and Admiral Han had been explicit. This was about justice, not revenge. But military targets received no mercy. Shipyards became rubble. Weapon factories reduced to molten craters. Supply depots vanished in nuclear fire. The Vral economy built on conquest and exploitation was dismantled in 3 weeks. Infrastructure that took centuries to build was gone. The Krell Dominion tried mobilizing a response. They assembled 800 warships, the largest military force deployed in decades. They would crush the humans and restore order. They didn't make it out of their home system. Human intelligence had mapped every Krell military installation, every fleet staging area. When the Krell fleet began assembling, human long-range missiles struck. Not at ships, but at fuel depots, ammunition stores, command centers. The Krell fleet found itself stranded without fuel, supplies, or coordination. They surrendered without firing a shot. Agent Jian Seo worked behind enemy lines, coordinating with resistance movements on conquered worlds. Not every species benefited from Council rule. Many were victims, forced to comply through threat of extermination. Jiang provided weapons, intelligence, hope. Humanity couldn't be everywhere at once, but they could arm and support species wanting to throw off oppressors. Uprisings erupted on 17 worlds. The Galactic Council, already reeling from human military victories, now faced internal collapse. The war continued 4 months. Not because humanity struggled to win, but because Admiral Han refused to let it become a war of extermination. She could have destroyed the Vral homeworld. Could have exterminated the Krell. The capability was there. But she didn't. Because humanity was proving a point. They weren't the monsters the Council tried making them. They were simply done being victims. The Galactic Council chamber looked different now. Half the seats were empty, abandoned by species that fled or surrendered. The remaining delegates sat in shocked silence as Taeyang Kim returned to address them. But he wasn't Ambassador Kim anymore. He wore a military uniform with Fleet Admiral rank insignia. The diplomatic mask was completely gone. The Galactic Council is dissolved, Taeyang announced. His voice carried none of the careful diplomacy from before. This was fact, not negotiation. Effective immediately, all council authority is revoked. All tribute systems abolished. All subjugated species released from obligations. An ethics delegate tried objecting. You cannot simply dismantle an institution that maintained order for order? Taiyang's voice cut like a blade. You call it order when the Vral commit genocide and you approve it? When the Krell run slave operations and you look away? When dozens of species live in terror while you profit from their suffering? He placed a tablet on the podium. This contains documentation of 417 separate atrocities committed by council species over the last century. Everyone was reported to this body. Everyone was ignored or actively endorsed. The chamber stayed silent. Humanity tried working within your system, Taeyang continued. We believed reason and evidence could lead to justice. We were wrong. The only thing your council understands is force, and now you've experienced what happens when you push a peaceful species too far. He gestured to the tactical display on the wall. It showed current human military positions. Ships orbiting every major council world. Defense platforms controlling key trade routes. Occupation forces on resistant worlds. Here are the new terms. Every species maintains sovereignty over their own territory. No more empires. No more conquest. No more slavery or tribute. You'll govern yourselves and leave others to do the same. A Krell delegate clicked aggressively. And if we refuse? If we ignore your demands once your fleets leave? Taiyang's expression didn't change. Then, humanity returns. And, next time, we won't show restraint. You've seen what we're capable of when we hold back. Test us and discover what we can do when we don't. The threat hung in the air. Every species in that chamber had seen footage from the Ortcloud battle. They watched human weapons tear through defenses considered state-of-the-art. They knew the threat wasn't empty. Minji Park stood in what had been the council's administrative center, now converted to the first new regional council. Representatives from 20 species sat around a circular table designed so no position was elevated above others. This council will operate on democratic principles, Minji explained. One species, one vote. Decisions require majority approval, but any decision affecting a specific species needs their consent. A delegate from a smaller species that had been subjugated by the Krell for generations raised a tentative hand. And humanity? How many votes does humanity get? One, Minji said simply. Same as everyone else. We're not here to rule you. We're here to make sure no one else does either. The concept confused several delegates. They had never experienced a powerful species that didn't immediately try dominating. But, you have the weapons, another delegate pointed out. You have military capability to enforce whatever you want. Yes, Minji agreed. And, we'll use that capability to stop anyone trying to recreate the old system. But, we won't use it to control you. There's a difference between being able to destroy someone and actually doing it. The old council never learned that distinction. She displayed a document. This is a proposed constitution for the new regional council system. It includes protections for species sovereignty, dispute resolution protocols, and clear military action limitations. Review it, suggest changes, and we'll vote together. The delegates looked at each other uncertainly. This was completely outside their experience. One finally asked, and if we vote against humanity's proposals? Then, they don't pass, Minji said. That's how democracy works. Doyen Choi had returned to running cargo routes. His ship, the Morning Star, was restored to civilian configuration. The weapons and military equipment were in storage, ready for deployment if needed, but for now he was back to hauling freight. He delivered reconstruction supplies to worlds devastated by council wars. Medical equipment, building materials, agricultural supplies. Humanity wasn't just tearing down the old system. They were actively helping build something better. At a delivery point on a former Krell colony, the local administrator approached him. She was from a species humanity had never encountered before the war, one of dozens of civilizations hidden away on subjugated worlds. "Why?" she asked simply. "Why help us? You've already won. You could take whatever you want." Doyen looked at cargo containers being unloaded. "Because that's not who we are. We fought because we had to, not because we wanted to. Now that it's over, we want to build. Want to help. Want to prove there's another way. The other species don't understand that." "I know," Doyen said. "But they will, eventually. Or at least, we hope they will." On Earth, monuments were being constructed. Not monuments to military victory or conquered enemies. Monuments to new Jeju's dead. Every single person killed in the massacre was listed by name. 2 million names carved into black stone stretching for kilometers. Hyojin Yoon's name was there with all her students. Juno Lee's name was there with other farmers. Every single person remembered and honored. Admiral Binahan attended the dedication ceremony. She stood before the wall of names and spoke to the assembled crowd, which included representatives from dozens of species. "We didn't want this," she said quietly. "We wanted to teach and farm and build. We wanted to create art and explore the universe and raise children in peace. They wouldn't let us." She gestured to the monument. "These names represent the price of the galaxy's cruelty. The cost of a system built on exploitation and violence. They died because they were weak. Because they couldn't fight back. Because they believed civilization meant something." Binna's voice grew stronger. "We will carry their memory. And we will make sure what happened to them never happens to anyone else. Not on our watch. Not ever again." She retired after that, leaving active service for a quiet home where she could tend her garden. But she remained on call, always ready if humanity needed her again. The galaxy settled into uneasy peace. Species that ruled through force now found themselves constrained by human oversight. Some resented it. Some accepted it. All understood the old ways were finished. Humanity patrolled the spaceways not as conquerors but as enforcers of a simple principle: leave each other alone or deal with us. It wasn't perfect. There were still conflicts, tensions, species that tested boundaries. But genocide ended. Slavery ended. The casual cruelty characterizing the old council's rule ended. Not because the galaxy suddenly became enlightened, but because humanity made the consequences clear. The diplomatic masks were gone. The pretense of weakness abandoned. Humanity stood revealed as what they truly were: not the most peaceful species in the galaxy, but the most patient. Not the weakest, but the most restrained. Not naive idealists, but pragmatic defenders of a principle they believed in deeply: the right to live without terror. The galaxy taught humanity a harsh lesson about power and civilization's nature. In return, humanity taught the galaxy something it had forgotten: that restraint is a choice, not a weakness. That mercy is a decision, not a requirement. And that pushing a peaceful species to war is the worst mistake any civilization can make.